payer and a payee and all that sort of thing.
Was it the same as a promise to pay?
Yeah, it's a promise to pay.
Okay.
It's a promise to not only pay, but a promise to return your gold. It's your gold. It's not that they're promising to pay you; they're promising to give it back to you.
Got it.
A little different. And so these papers, pieces of paper, were just as good as gold, as long as they didn't lose them or have them lost in fire. A little bit of danger there. And then they got tired of having to come back and pick up their gold in order to make a transaction. They have to bring their piece of paper back to the jeweler and say, okay, I want my 1 ounce of gold or 5 ounces and so forth. Then they take the gold into the market and make the exchange, and then the person who got the gold would go back to the jeweler and say, okay, now I want to put it on deposit with you. It was like a little cumbersome. So this system evolved, and they stopped putting names on it. They just said to the bearer, whoever that is, to the bearer on demand. Whoever holds this piece of paper will get it. And that was a big step forward, because now that is really what paper money became. And as we know it today, everybody can use it. You don't have your name on it like a check. It's just whoever's got their hands on it, that's it. So that started to really help the economy. That really was a tremendous advance historically to economies, because it enhanced and facilitated economic transactions. But now here's where the evil began to creep into it. The jewelers were sitting around looking at this stack of gold and silver in their warehouse, and they're thinking, this stuff is just sitting there. And probably happened something like this. I'm going to guess that maybe the youngest or the son of the jeweler would say, Dad, you're getting pretty old now. I'm going to take over this business pretty soon. I got an idea. I think since this gold is just sitting here, and nobody comes in and asks for it. I mean, it just sits here. Maybe 2 or 3% of the people come in and ask for their gold at one time. But it comes back in again eventually. 97% of that gold just sits here all the time. Why don't we issue paper receipts for this gold more than what we actually have? And we can loan those paper receipts out just like money, and they'll pay us interest on it. And they'll never know the difference, because they never come and ask for the gold anyway. And the old man probably said, no, we can't do that, son. So anyway, he probably died, and then the son took over and said, yeah, we're going to issue maybe 10% more receipts for this gold than we actually have. And nobody will know, and we'll make money on that. And that was the beginning of modern banking. And so that worked fine. And then as the years go by, I'm imagining that probably his son said, Dad, we're only loaning out 10% of this money that we don't actually have. It's a good business. We're making good money on nothing here. Why don't we increase that to 25% instead of 10%? It's very conservative. Only 3% asked for it. And the old man probably said, no, we can't do that. That's not prudent. So he died, and the young son took over, and then they went to 25%. And then the next generation went to 30 and 40 and 50%, and then 70% and 80% and 90%. And today we're at the stage where there is no percentage backing of it at all. And it's all paper receipts, basically, but people have forgotten that those are supposed to be receipts for gold or silver. They've just gotten so used over the generations, so used to accepting paper by itself, that they've lost the understanding of how this all started and all how it should be.
So is that what the fiat part is?
That is exactly what fiat money is, with a little extra twist. The fiat money is usually issued by or enforced by the government, and you are required to accept it. Now, just plain old money made out of nothing, a banknote that's just a promise to pay something that people don't have, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're free to reject it. And if some guy comes to me, or some banker says, here's a banknote, of course we don't have any gold behind it, but we want you to accept this as money, I can say, no, thank you, you got to be crazy, and walk away. But when governments do that, they pass what they call legal tender laws.
I want to ask you one thing before you go into that, not to divert us, but is it true that 13th century China was issuing fiat money?
Oh, yes, that's very, very true.
Can you just share a little bit about that? I thought that was fascinating.
Sure. Well, the story is kind of interesting. It came to us from the writings of Marco Polo, who visited China in that period, and he spoke about the Khan, or the ruler of China, had perfected the art. He called it the art of alchemy, actually. And what they did is they took the bast, the little white, it was black, a black part of the of the bark of a tree right underneath or on the outside, I've forgotten which, of the white part of the bark. In any event, they took this very thick and tough material, sort of like paper, but it was produced by trees, and they would cut it into little squares, and then they would put their seals on it, and they would color it, and people would impress their little ring seals on it, and all the officials would, in essence, make it authentic. Like we have all the signatures and the seals and the serial numbers and everything on our money today. That's what the Khan of China did in a way by impressing all these seals and writings on this bast. And then they issued them in various denominations that related to silver and gold. They were the exact equivalent of silver or gold coins in various sizes, and they would put those figures on the paper money or the bast money. And then the king of China, the ruler of China, issued a decree that the people had to accept it under pain of death. Well, naturally, they accepted it. And so anytime the Khan wanted more money, he just issued a decree to his administrators to go get some more bast, to cut it up, put these seals on it, put the numbers on it, and issue it. He could buy anything he wanted to. And everybody in the kingdom accepted it because they had to by law. And so that's how fiat money actually began in 13th century China. And it's not much different today. In fact, on the basis of principle, there's no difference today. So anyway, that is fiat money because the ruler required people to accept it by law.
So is the concept of fiat by decree, legal decree?
Yes,
that's
the
exactly essence of it.
By decree.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not only worthless with nothing behind it, but it also has this decree that you must accept it, and that's really the proper way of looking at fiat money. So anyway, when we get back to the different kinds of money, you see, first we had this commodity money, and then we had receipt money, which was perfectly good as long as there was gold and silver in the vault backing up that receipt. And then they started to nibble on it and issue more receipts than there was gold, and that's where this fractional reserve money started to take place, or fractional money. And that, of course, just always gives way. Every time in history they started to use fractional money, the fraction kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller until finally it was zero, and at that point the fractional money becomes fiat money. So there you have the different kinds of money, and it's not very difficult to understand. It's an interesting and fascinating part of history because we see over and over again nations and societies making the same mistake. They go down the same path, apparently ignorant of what happened before in history in other places of the world, or if they do know it, they choose to ignore it because it's very profitable for those who are making the decisions and running the system. They figure, oh, well, so what? Another 100 years from now, maybe this system will fall apart, but right now it's a pretty good game.
Where does the legal tender issue come in?
Well, that's the government decree that you must accept it. A legal tender law is a law that requires everybody to accept the government money as legal tender. You must accept it for the payment of debts, public and private. I think is how it's worded in our own country. All nations that issue fiat money have these legal tender laws. Because otherwise, as the money becomes more and more worthless, people would say, I don't want to use this. I'll use something else. I'll start using some other nation's money, or I'll start using gold and silver coins again, or I'll start bartering, or I'll do something else to escape this plunder. And, of course, governments don't want you to escape their plunder, and so they issue legal tender laws like we have here in this country.
I'd like to cut into the center of everything and ask you at this point, and with what you've read and put together from the past of how we got here and how other civilizations have gotten there, do you think or feel that free markets ever existed? And do you think we live in a free market now?
Are you talking about just this country?
This country and maybe the world, whatever it is you want to respond to.
Well, yeah, it's pretty much the same, really, either way. The free market on a world scale never really existed for very long. All nations and systems start as a free market, and that is what I mean by that is people have no restrictions. They can do whatever they want to. They can accept gold or silver. They can accept cigarettes as money. They can barter.